Thanks for the upgrade, my dear. Ethan strolled into the living room like he owned the place, tossing his sunglasses onto the coffee table. His tailored suit was crisp, his new designer shoes pristine, and his luggage emblazoned with high-end lock spilled over with luxury. First class to Europe, 5-star hotels. No, this is the life I've been missing, Sarah. I couldn't help it. He laughed, loud and unrestrained. His smug expression faltered. What's so funny? Oh, Ethan. I shook my head, barely containing my amusement. You have no idea what you've done. My name is Sarah, and I'm 34 years old, a cybersecurity specialist, and for 7 years, I was married to a man who was a walking red flag disguised as charm. Ethan was the smooth talker, the dreamer, the kind of guy who made wild promises and left me to figure out how to deliver them. While I built a stable career, he bounced from one grand scheme to another, forever on the brink of his big break. I ignored the warning signs, the financial secrecy, the excuses, the way his grand ideas always seemed to involve my wallet. I wanted to believe we were 18. Then, last week, at 2 a.m., Ethan made a mistake he couldn't talk his way out of. I was asleep upstairs when he crept onto my laptop. He must have thought he was being clever, quietly copying down my credit card details, snapping a few photos on his phone, then slipping back into bed as if nothing had happened. But there was one problem. The card he stole wasn't a personal account. It was a dummy credit card, linked to a fraud detection program I ran at work. Every charge triggered an automatic alert straight to the authorities. Ethan had no idea. He just turned himself into a case study. The next morning, over coffee, I watched the alerts flood in $50, 000 in luxury purchases, designer clothes, expensive watches, first-class flights to Paris. I didn't panic. I smiled. I called my lawyer, Chloe. You're not going to believe this, I said, relaying the whole mess. She didn't even try to hold back her laughter. Why stole that card? She gasped between chuckles. The one designed to detect fraud. Exactly. He's an idiot, she declared. Every charge is getting flagged. Have the authorities contacted you yet? Not yet, but it's only a matter of time. I stayed quiet, waiting to see how far Ethan would take it. A couple of days later, he left a note on the counter. Taking some time for myself. Don't wait up. Translation: he was using my stolen money to live it up abroad. Every night, I watched the fraud alerts roll in Michelin-star restaurants, luxury suites, shopping sprees. Each notification was a victory. 3 days in, I got a call. This is Agent Keller with Federal Investigations. We've identified fraudulent activity tied to your account. Do you know who might be responsible? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. My husband. There was a pause. Your husband? I explained everything. The stolen dummy card, the automated fraud detection. Keller let out a low whistle. That's a new one. We'll need a formal statement, but given the evidence, he's in serious trouble. By the time Ethan walked back through the door, high on indulgence, I was ready. He sauntered in light kicking, returning to his castle, oblivious to the disaster he'd walked into. Thanks for the upgrade, he said with a cocky grin. You really outdid yourself this time. I laughed again, shaking my head. His smile wavered. What's so funny? Oh, Ethan, I said, watching realization creep into his eyes. You're about to find out. He dropped his designer duffel with a thud, draping his expensive jacket over the couch like a man who thought he was untouchable. Seriously, Sarah, he said, loosening his collar. You should have told me about that card ages ago. Imagine how much fun we could have had. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. And how exactly did you think this was going to end? He smirked, kicking off his shoes. You're always so uptight about money. It's not like you can afford it. I figured you'd get over it once you saw how happy it made me. His audacity was almost impressive. I bit back another laugh, knowing that every second he spent bragging was just another nail in his coffin. So, I said, tilting my head, you really thought all of this was just a gift from me? Not thought, he corrected, pointing at himself. No, it's about time you loosen up. A knock at the door interrupted him. I smiled, right on time. I smiled at a tight, unreadable expression. I'll bet. As soon as Ethan disappeared into the shower, humming some off-key tune, I picked up my phone and texted Chloe. He's back, ready to move forward. Her reply came instantly. Perfect, I'll alert Agent Keller. For the past week, Chloe and Agent Keller had been preparing the case against Ethan. Every chart, every indulgence, every arrogant mistake had been meticulously tracked. His designer shopping sprees, his five-star hotels, the first-class flights, each transaction, a breadcrumb leading straight to his downfall. Ethan had no idea. He was walking straight into a trap of his own making. Agent Keller had advised patience. The more confident he is, the better. Let him think he got away with it. And so I had waited, listening now as Ethan's singing echoed from the bathroom, feeling nothing but a quiet sense of finality. For years, he had taken advantage of my trust, my stability, my kindness. But this time, he was about to learn what it felt like to be plied. Fresh from his shower, Ethan emerged wrapped in a plush towel, dripping with self-satisfaction. He flopped onto the couch, stretching like a man who believed the world belonged to him. You should have seen Paris, he said, reaching into his bag and pulling out a gold watch. It gleamed under the soft lighting as he admired it. The shops, the restaurants, it was like a dream. Sounds incredible, I said, leaning against the doorway. Tell me more. And he did. Ethan launched into an elaborate retelling of his week-long spree, exaggerated hand gestures, smug smiles, unnecessary details about champagne quality at rooftop bars. Every word was a confession, and he had no idea I was recording every second of it. A file, ready to be forwarded to Agent Keller. Finally, he held up the watch with a satisfied grin. And the best part, he chuckled, nobody suspected a thing, not even you. The next morning, Chloe and I met over coffee. He's got no defense, she said, scrolling through the evidence on our tablet. Fraud alerts, the charges, his little confession is airtight. Agent Keller and the local police are ready. It's just a matter of timing now. I nodded, a slow exhale escaping me. And after that, he'll be facing multiple charges: fraud, identity theft, unauthorized use of financial accounts. Given the amount involved, it's serious. Best case, he cuts a deal and avoids prison. Worst case, she shrugged, he's looking at years behind bars. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if I should feel sorry for him. But then I remembered the smug way he'd flaunted his stolen luxuries, the way he had used my trust as currency. This wasn't a mistake. It was who he was. That evening, Ethan lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the storm about to hit. 10. A knock at the door. My pulse quickened with fear, or with anticipation. I crossed the room and pulled the door open to reveal Agent Keller, flanked by two uniformed officers. Good evening, Miss Miller, Keller said, his tone polite but firm. Is Ethan home? I stepped aside, a slow smile forming. Right inside. Make yourselves comfortable. Ethan barely looked up from his phone as the officers entered. What's going on? He asked, brow furrowing as he sat her day up. Agent Keller didn't break stride. Ethan Miller, you're under investigation for multiple counts of fraud and unauthorized use of financial accounts. We'd like you to come with us for questioning. The color drained from Ethan's face. What? No, this has to be a mistake, he sputtered, eyes darting to me. Sarah, tell them this is crazy. I crossed my arms, tilting my head. I don't know, Ethan. You've been awfully busy lately. Maybe you should explain it to them? The officer stepped forward. One began reading his rights. Ethan scrambled to his feet, panic settling in. You can do this, Sarah. This is a setup. You're my wife. You're supposed to stand by me. I leaned against the doorway, smirking. Funny, I mused. I thought husbands weren't supposed to steal from their wives. Guess we're both learning something today. Ethan's expression twisted from shock to fury. You won't get away with this, he shouted as the officers led him toward the door. I smiled, slow and steady. Oh, Ethan, I said as the door shut behind him. I already have. Silence settled over the house. He was gone. Finally. But this wasn't over. Not yet. An hour later, Chloe called. He's in with Keller now, she reported, her voice level, and surprised already trying to spin the story in his favor. Let me guess, I sighed, playing the victim. Right on the money. Claims you gave him permission to use the card. I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. Of course he does. Doesn't matter, Chloe assured me. Between the fraud alerts, the flat charges, and your recording, he doesn't stand a chance. The next morning, Agent Keller called with an update. We've got everything we need, he said. Your husband, sorry, soon-to-be ex-husband, admitted to using the card, but insists he didn't know it was part of a fraud detection program. He's trying to pin the mix-up on you. I rolled my eyes. Of course he is. Ethan had always been a smooth talker. But this time, no one was buying it. That sounds about right, I said, leaning back in my chair. What's next? We're moving forward with the charges, Keller replied. He's facing multiple counts of fraud and unauthorized use of a financial account. Given the amount of money involved, he'll face serious consequences. The buyer protection programs flag his luxury purchases, so those will be reimbursed. You're not responsible for a dime. The relief hit me like a tidal wave. 4 days, I've been burdened by the weight of Ethan's actions, terrified he'd slip through the cracks, but hearing Keller's assurance, I realized how far my victory reached. Thank you, I said, my voice soft. Don't thank me, Keller responded. This case practically handed itself to us. You handled it brilliantly. The fallout was harsher on Ethan than I'd anticipated. News of his arrest spread like wildfire among our friends and acquaintances, and soon, his image as the charming, carefree husband began to crumble. Nicoletti woman I'd suspected he was seeing seemingly dropped him the moment the charges came to light. His luxury items were seized, his flights were cancelled, his accounts were frozen. One evening, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Ethan. Sarah, he said, his voice quiet, defeated. I need to talk to you. I couldn't help but laugh. Ethan, the only thing you need to do is figure out how to explain yourself to the judge. Please, he begged. I messed up. Okay, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just what? I interrupted, cold and direct, just trying to steal $50,000 from me. Just thinking I wouldn't notice, just assuming I was too blind or too forgiving to stop you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, he muttered, I thought you loved me. My anger flared, but I kept my voice steady. I did, Ethan. I loved the person I thought you were, but the person who stole from me, who lied to me, who thought he could get away with it, that's not someone I could ever love. Without waiting for a response, I hung up. A week later, Chloe called with the inevitable news. Ethan took a plea deal, she said. He's avoiding jail time, but he'll have to pay back every cent. He tried to steal and do community service. His credits shot for years. Sounds fitting, I said. He always wanted the high life. Now he'll see what it's like on the other side. Chloe laughed. You're handling this better than most would. I smiled to myself. It's funny. 4 years, I thought Ethan was the one holding things together. His charm, his ambition, his big ideas, that's what kept us going. But now I see it clearly. I was the one holding everything up. He was just that weight. The day the divorce papers came, I poured myself a glass of wine and Saturday on the couch, taking in the apartment that now felt entirely mine. Ethan's absence wasn't a loss. It was freedom, a chance to rebuild without the constant shadow of his selfishness. As I sipped my wine, I thought back to the day he strutted through the door, flaunting his stolen goods, smug in his supposed upgrades. He'd been so sure of himself, so confident in his brilliance. And now, he was the one paying the price. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of a life I could finally call my own. The apartment was eerily quiet after Ethan's arrest. His things were gone a little. He had sewed or stuffed into his designer duffel bag. But the space felt lighter, almost as though the weight of his betrayal had lifted. For the first time in ages, I could sit in my own home, without feeling the oppressive shadow of his presence. Chloe dropped by one afternoon to deliver some final paperwork. "How are you holding up?" she asked, settling onto the couch with her usual no-nonsense air. "Better than I thought," I said, handing her a cup of coffee. "It's strange. I don't even feel angry anymore, just relieved." She smiled knowingly. "You've already won, Sarah. You didn't just survive this, you came out stronger." I pondered her words as we finalized the documents detailing Ethan's financial restitution. It wasn't just about the money, though that was satisfying in its own right. It was about regaining my independence. For years, I'd let Ethan dictate the terms of our relationship, thinking it was easier to keep the peace. But now I realized peace built on compromise and silence wasn't peace at all. A week later, the official divorce letter arrived, packed into an unassuming envelope that felt far too small for such a monumental document. I had it for a moment, letting the weight of it sink in, before I opened it. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, until I found the words that mattered most: finalized and irrevocable. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter in my hands, taking a rare moment to reflect. This was it. The end of one chapter, and the beginning of everything else. This wasn't the life I had imagined when I married Ethan. I had pictured stability, partnership, a future built on trust and shared dreams. But as I looked around the home I had rebuilt for myself, I realized I had gained something far better: freedom, clarity, and the undeniable knowledge that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. That evening, Lauren arrived with a bottle of wine and a carton of my favorite takeout. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass, "and to the absolute dumpster fire you just walked away from." I laughed, clinking my glass against hers, "to never settling for less than I deserve." Over the next few weeks, I slowly pieced together the shape of my new life. I redecorated the apartment, adding color and warmth, infusing it with pieces of myself that had been missing for too long. I finally took the solo vacation I had dreamed of for years, tracing the coastline, feeling the weight of my past dissolve into the horizon. Ethan attempted to reach out a few times through mutual acquaintances, half-hearted emails, even a laughably tone-deaf letter claiming he had changed. I never responded. There was nothing left to say. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. Every now and then, I heard whispers about his life. Struggling to find work, his once polished reputation tainted by fraud charges, moving back in with his parents, still convinced he could talk his way out of anything. I didn't feel sorry for him. If anything, I felt relief. He wasn't my problem anymore. A month after everything was finalized, I stood by the window, cradling a mug of coffee as the city stretched awake beneath me. Sunlight streamed through the living room, catching the fresh coat of paint I had chosen my favorite shade of blue. The space no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like home. It was peaceful. It was mine. And it was filled with possibility. For years, I had believed in the promise of marriage, convinced that love meant endurance, that compromise meant strength. I had silenced the quiet voice inside me that had whispered warnings, ignored the nagging feeling that Ethan's charm was merely a mask for selfishness. But now, I understood something important. Walking away wasn't failure. It was survival. That weekend, Lauren and I met for brunch, a new tradition we had started since Ethan's exit. Between bites of waffles and sips of mimosas, she asked, "So, what's next for you?" I smiled, feeling a deep, unfamiliar sense of peace settle over me. "Honestly, just focusing on myself. Work is going great, and I've been thinking about taking a longer trip, maybe somewhere quiet, near the mountains." She raised her glass. "That's what I like to hear. You deserve it." For the first time in years, my choices belong solely to me. No compromises. No second guessing. Just the freedom to live on my own terms. The last time I heard from Ethan, it was through an email long, meandering apology that read more like self-pity than remorse. I skimmed the first few lines before deleting it without a second thought. I didn't need closure from him. I had already found it in myself. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, gazing out at the city lights flickering in the distance. I thought about everything it had taken to reach this moment's betrayal, the heartbreak, the fight to reclaim what was mine. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. And as I lifted my glass to the night sky, I whispered, "Here's to me. Here's to starting over." With that, I closed the chapter on Ethan for good, ready to embrace whatever came next.